Now we are going to go a little deeper into some of the other libraries, and especially specifically drums. All right, so let's have a new track here. I'm gonna add an effect. I'm gonna say, okay, let's just do complete control. That'll give us all the native instrument stuff. So I'm just gonna go into here, and there's something called Drum Lab, which, you know, sounds like we could make some drums with that, right? All right, I'll double click this. I'm gonna load this plugin. All right, so this is Drum Lab. As you might have seen when this thing loaded, actually, it spread these different colors across the keyboard. So you can see these have different functions. So they're playing all these different drum instruments. This is an entire kit of drums, from a kick drum all the way to like percussion up here. So pretty cool, you can actually play drums from here. So if I wanted to record a drum beat, just find my snare here, right? So you more or less, you can play on the keys here. This is a MIDI instrument. These are audio samples that are manipulated just inside of this piece of software. You can kind of dial in your different settings here. As you can hear, it's getting, you know, I'm playing with this knob here under this heading called transients. It's giving it a little bit more of a punch. So Drum Lab is pretty cool. You can get some really cool stuff out of it. So obviously with Drum Lab, I'm playing these drums across a keyboard, and it looks very nice, but if you're a drummer, it's not exactly the best kind of experience as far as laying down some drums. That's why I have this guy. You can use this plugged directly into the DAW and bypass the machine software as just a pad controller, as simple as it is a keyboard controller. I would be lying to you if I said that I recorded drums this way. That's not how I do it. I use Machine to do it. So I'm gonna jump over into Machine real quick and show you how I make my drums. Kind of in like a little deeper dive than we've done previously. So here we are. This is Machine. I showed you a little bit before how it works, about how to sequence sounds, about how to browse sounds. But now I'm just gonna roll through here and show you how I would use this to make drums. Native Instruments has a lot of expansions for Machine, which is great because you can tune in a specific genre of music that you're trying to make. Even though if you're a drummer, you kind of know that you can use any sound to make drums and it'll sound cool. In general, I just use the Machine Factory library or an expansion, but when it comes to acoustic drums, sometimes you want something that's a little more focused on sounding acoustic. So the best way to look into that is to just get something from the third party, because this is a sampler and you can plug third party samples into it. There's a company called Looploft. I think they're called Yurt Rock now. They have some really great samples. Actually, I'll play one of the kits that I have of theirs. First, I'm gonna hit user, which toggles over to my kits that I've modified. And I'm gonna hit the star here. These are my very favorites. As you can hear, there's no sample playing, but I don't really need it because I made them myself. So here we go. All right, we're gonna go to kits. We're gonna go to Looploft, and these are all the Looploft kits that I have. So let's go ahead and add one of these kits in here. I'm going to use this Indie Rock kit right here. Load. All right. As you might be able to hear right away, it's got a really dry sound to it, meaning like there's no reverb, no room really associated with it. Sounds like a really nice dry acoustic kit. You can do a lot of stuff with this. You can add some reverb onto it. In fact, let's go ahead and do that. We're gonna go up to the group level and I'm gonna add reverb. There's actually a built-in reverb inside of Machine, so I'm gonna use that. So we can make our room size super big. Let's make it 100%. Let's turn up the reverb time to like 5 or 6. Obviously that's a little too large. Now you got kind of a nice so it's got like a really nice tone. You know, it's not something that I would use like this out of the box, but if I brought a very dry drum part over into Reaper and started playing around with it, this would give me a lot of latitude as far as what I could do with it, since it's such an unaffected, meaning no effects, unaffected dry drum track. I could just grab it, throw it into Reaper, and then play with whatever effects I wanted to. Native Instruments isn't really famous for acoustic drums, so there's other platforms like Studio Drummer and Easy Drummer, and there's other ones too. Maschine is kind of like an open sample platform. You can get all kinds of samples for this system. Ableton also has their own drum racks. You can buy, I'm sure, third-party drum racks, though I've never tried to do it myself. You know, in general, there's a lot of really great ways to get acoustic drums where you don't have to hire a drummer, you don't have to have a drum kit, you don't have to sample your own drums. That's kind of the benefit of when you use sampled instruments or sample sets from third parties, is that they put the effort in and they had a recording studio, or they took the time to set up a bunch of microphones and made it sound really nice. So you really don't have to do that if you don't want to. So real quick, I'm going to show you Splice. I don't really use Splice. I've used it before. I'm not thrilled about Splice for a few reasons, which I'll explain. But in general, it's a great place to get samples. If you already have a Splice subscription, if you're going to use this, and they give you a certain amount of credits per month that you can download a drum kit and use it. So I'm going to go in here actually, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. This was recommended for me right here. So how about we try this Breaks and Beats hip hop kit here. They'll give you a bunch of little samples, and it's like, okay. It's pretty cool. Nice. So yeah, these are all loops here. You could actually just get a drum loop from Splice and use it. I caution against that, however, because I've been running into people on YouTube have actually been saying recently that a lot of the loops that are used inside of Splice, because so many people use the platform, actually they're getting in trouble because they're getting hit with Content ID, and they say that your music is actually sampling or stealing copyrighted stuff from somebody who already published a track that was using that loop. So you'll get a little ding on your YouTube account that says, hey, this isn't yours, you know? These are royalty-free samples. Anybody can use them, which is kind of the problem. If you're using a loop, I would recommend modifying them to the form where it would not sound like the original enough to trigger a Content ID. So let's just go ahead and I'm gonna grab one of these random things. So yeah, there's loops and there's individual sounds. Oh, I like this one. All right, let's grab this one. I'm gonna grab this. You can get this for 1 credit. I'm gonna grab that. All right, so then what it did was it threw me over to the app to download this loop that I just had. So what you would do is you would go into your library, and there's that drum break that I just had. So I'm gonna say, all right, download. It says sync locally or download, because I want to download that. So I just downloaded it using that piece of software, and I'm going to go ahead and drag that. Just found it in the file system, and I'm going to drag it right onto this thing in Maschine here. So I'm going to crack open the sampler, which is this little waveform looking thing. Pretty cool, right? All right, so now we're going to go ahead and slice this up onto the pads of Maschine. This is basically how to take a loop and change it into something that you want rather than get stuck with the beat that's already there. Down here, I'm gonna hit detect. What it's doing is finding a lot of transients. I'm gonna turn up the sensitivity. As I extend sensitivity higher and higher, it's finding more and more of those transients. If I go to 100%, it should have everything. Almost everything. So I might have to do a little bit of manual slicing still. So I'll go in there here a little bit, and I'll just make another slice here. All right, so I pretty much got everything. There's another one here. I'll just scroll in here, hit that. You can always change the start and end times later if you need to. Cool. All right, so I can actually now listen to each of these samples just by clicking on them in the sampler here. And what I want to do is I want to add this to a group, a new group. So I'm going to make a group up here, and then I'm going to grab this sample slice I just had. I'm going to grab it, and I'm going to drop it onto this new group. And what it's going to do is it's going to spread each of these slices across the pads. Obviously, there's only 16, so it's only going to grab the first 16 slices. I'd do this a little more surgically and deliberately and mindfully if I was actually making a song with this, but I'm just going to show you how it works. basically all it did was take all those slices and put them onto pads. So I can make my own rhythm out of those samples that I just sliced. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so I'll drop down the BPM and I'll just record something real quick. Here we go. Cool. So I'll just grab this, just delete this. Just one bar loop is cool. All right, so yeah, just a real basic beat, you know, but it's different from the original, which was. All right, so I just remade that into. So it's just different, you know, like it's your own. That's how I would use a loop. I would just break it into its individual slices. You can do this with any sampler. You can just bring in this loop and slice it up into little pieces. You can see how easy it is on a machine, which is probably I would prefer to do it there. If you weren't using a sample kit, you know, you wanted to recompose this loop into something else, that's an easy way to do it. Loops are generally cheaper than kits, so it's actually a really nice way to be able to do that. Hip-hop community's been doing this for almost 40 years now, sampling sounds from records and chopping them up and making them into something new with the original MPC. Roger Lynn, the king of drum machines, was one of the first people to introduce the MPC, and that was just like a complete game changer for all of hip-hop. The most popular sampled still nowadays are the Funky Drummer and Led Zeppelin's When the Levee Breaks. You can hear all across pop music in the 1980s and 90s kind of a reuse of those two specific drum loops. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend going and doing that nowadays. You have to get samples cleared to use them in your music. You can do it just for fun and sample, you know, any break that you want, any drum loop that you want from a popular record, but you're going to run into some difficulty if you try to put that up on Spotify. So that's basically drums and virtual instruments. There's a lot more you could go into. I could give you an entire course on sampling drums. However, our time is limited, so we're going to move on.